Hi guys! With the spring and summer heat coming, we all want to know how long do treats last. So today I'm showing you the shelf life of the 10 most common dessert table treats, including chocolate covered, caramel, or candy, and the exact order to start preparing each of them ahead of time, as if we were making a custom order together, as well as other tips for how to store them and extend their shelf life to keep them fresh while looking their best. This information is especially important for upcoming parties and events this season, so let's create something magical! Starting off with the items that can be prepped the farthest in advance is number 1, our cake pop dough. This task can be done several weeks ahead of time as long as you follow some important guidelines. I'm making my go-to base recipe found here on my channel that can be used for creating either cake pops or cakesicles. The steps you'll want to complete first are baking the batter, sweating the cake, and kneading the dough in your mixer. If you're unfamiliar with that process, I show you how in my cake pop tutorial. And guys, keep in mind we're not going to roll them just yet since the cake pop dough is going to be stored in the freezer. Instead, I recommend freshly rolling right before you're ready to dip. This ensures the dough is at the right temperature for dipping into the chocolate. If you're a perfectionist when it comes to rolling shapes like me, the shapes can get distorted during storing, and I prefer not to have to fix and re-roll them. So after forming into a big ball of dough, just seal it up inside of a Ziploc bag and airtight container, then right into the freezer for up to 1 month. Another convenient make-ahead item to accomplish on your checklist are what I call make-ahead decorations, which is anything made out of chocolate or fondant. For example, molding all of Minnie's chocolate bows to have ready to stick onto my treats whenever I need them, as well as any fondant cutouts, which works out perfectly since the fondant should be completely dry before applying to your treats. For smooth and pliable, crack-free fondant, feel free to mix in some shortening and work it in, and remember to cornstarch both your surface and cookie cutters to prevent any sticking. As you can see, custom orders require lots of detail. I cut out all the shapes like little Minnie Mouse heads, ears, dots, and bows. However, all this work can be done up to 1 month beforehand to save you the trouble of leaving this for last minute, making the decorating part more enjoyable and less overwhelming. And after all the fondant has dried, if you plan on adding a touch of sparkle with some luster dust or edible paint, that can be brushed on before storing as well. Once you're finished, be sure to keep your delicate creations in a cool, dry place away from sunlight and sealed in airtight containers. So to recap, up to 1 month before the event, we have our frozen cake pop dough and decorations all completed. Next are any dry chocolate-covered treats like Oreos, Rice Krispy Treats, or Pretzels. Basically, any pre-made treats from the store that are less perishable and don't contain moisture. The only exceptions are dipping Madeleines in wafer cookies, which I'll show you later on. As for Oreos, regardless of the method of your choice, either molding or coating with a dipping fork, the shelf life is the same since the cookie is enrobed in chocolate. Go ahead and prep the chocolate-covered Oreos 2 to 3 weeks in advance. Once the Oreos are removed from the mold, the canvas is all ready to decorate before storing, and all you need to do is stick on your make-ahead decorations to bring them to life. I attached the gold mini ears around the edge of the Oreo, secured her pink chocolate bow on top, then placed tiny fondant polka dots on with a squeeze of edible adhesive. Decorating is definitely more fun when everything is made ahead of time. The same rules apply for chocolate-covered Rice Krispy Treats. The 2 to 3 week time frame is consistent whether they're store-bought or homemade, dipped or molded. It all depends on your preference. These pre-made strawberry Krispy Treats fit perfectly inside the mold without any cutting needed, and the result is a flawless finish and presentation for your dazzling decorations. At this point, the sticks can be inserted before decorating and storing. I'll demonstrate exactly how to safely store them in a few minutes. The solid chocolate really pops with some shimmer. Although I'm dusting this on 2 to 3 weeks in advance, any dry luster dust can be touched up right before the event if needed. And Minnie's favorite luster dust over pink chocolate is Rolcom brand in the shade Blush Pastel Pink. From experience, any fondant containing dark colored dyes will bleed, causing color transfer onto your treats from the edible adhesive, and heavy pieces like this Minnie Mouse piece will slide around. Stick to adhering pieces similar to this design with melted chocolate. The edible adhesive should only be used for decorations that are lighter weight and softer colors like the glove design shown here. The edible sugar pearls stick on just fine with a dot of adhesive. Keep the treat flat as you decorate and allow the glue to completely dry before picking it up. Chocolate-covered pretzel rods are another common staple included in the dry dip treats category. Likewise, it's 2 to 3 weeks. I roll mine into a puddle of chocolate on a sheet of parchment paper, however you like to get the job done. Although the small nub on the end isn't coated in chocolate, the pretzels will stay fresh inside of an airtight container like a barrel of pretzels at the store. Dip, drizzle, and top with gold sanding sugar, dressing them up with gold fondant bows and Minnie Mouse heads. Now that all these are prepped 2 to 3 weeks in advance, during that time it's essential to protect your hard work in a cool, dry place by transferring the treats into airtight containers lined with a layer of parchment paper on top to prevent sticking, and paper towel on the bottom layer as a cushioned flat surface, followed by the lid to lock in the freshness and prevent anything from getting stale or dried out. The location needs to be somewhere cool and dry away from humidity and sunlight. Not only can they melt, the dyes in the chocolate will fade and look drastically different than your finished product when exposed to a bright, sunny room. That's something you don't want to test out. An example of an ideal setup is my utility rack with a shelf cover, where I line up all my containers, keep the back part facing the wall open to circulate the air, and zip the front part closed. As time is ticking closer and closer to the event, let's fast forward to begin our caramel apples. Whether they're plain with toppings or double dipped with an outer shell of chocolate, the apples should be dipped no more than 3 days before your order is due. Although they hold up longer than that, the 3-day window is best for maximum freshness. My soft caramel clings to the apple without any prep, just a simple rinse and dry. However, for a chewy homemade version, be sure to include that extra step of boiling to remove the wax before dipping. That way the caramel stays on the skin as long as possible without sliding off. By the way, the 3-day guideline applies for both types of caramel. My 2-ingredient recipe here consists of la lechera, dulce de leche, and heavy cream. Stirring continuously on low heat until the dulce de leche is a nice fluid consistency for dipping. Although this is a softer said caramel, it will firm up in the fridge after 2 to 3 days. And guys, if you're enjoying so far, be sure to join the party and subscribe for more fun treat tutorials and hit that bell to receive all notifications. Minnie is our helper today. She's an expert apple dipper since there's lots of character apples at Disney. She says we need some marshmallows for her ears. I cut them in half to stick on top of the apple just like this. Then the optimal time to dip in chocolate is after 15 to 20 minutes. So far, caramel apples are one of the treats that must be stored in the fridge, but if done so too soon, the chocolate can crack from the drastic temperature change, similar to a shock reaction. So I advise to wait around 2 hours after decorating before chilling. As for regular caramel apples without that chocolate shell, there's no need to worry about cracks, and they can be chilled once the caramel has completely cooled after about an hour. Typically with decorated treats, the fridge ruins chocolate and decorations by causing condensation. As long as the caramel apples are packaged inside of candy apple boxes, they can last in the fridge for a week without affecting the decorations. Regardless of lasting a week, you always want to stand by the highest quality product for your customers, which is why I always dip these no more than 3 days before. And if you're familiar with pricing decorative apples, being that they have a large amount of chocolate and detail, they sometimes come out to $10 per apple, like these character apples at Disney were $10.99 each. So when charging premium prices, the customer should always receive a premium product. To keep the apples fresh and looking on point, I store inside of clear candy apple boxes with these mini cake boards underneath to go inside the fridge. Once the apples are punctured, excess moisture and bacteria forms around the stick at room temperature, and the only way to avoid that from happening is not keeping them out for extended periods of time. Plus, the caramel alone contains dairy products that require refrigeration for safe consumption. The outline is to dip, decorate, and refrigerate 3 days before. Finally, let's pick up where we left off on cake pops. Take out your frozen dough that was prepped up to a month ahead and allow it to thaw out to room temperature. Then roll into balls or your desired shape right before inserting the lollipop sticks and dipping into chocolate. I cut the edge of my melting wafers with a round cookie cutter to transform them into Minnie Mouse cake pops, holding for 10 to 15 seconds until the chocolate is set. The key is to freshly roll and dip 2 days before the order is due. The reason is that to an extent, chocolate acts as a seal to protect the dough on the outside, right? But mold and moisture can still grow underneath. The cake pop shouldn't be kept on the counter at room temperature for more than a few days. I'll discuss more tips and info that you should look out for during the clip of me packaging them up. Considering these are highly decorated with lots of glitter and their fridge will form condensation, I don't like storing my cake pops in the fridge, even for simple designs that are plain dip with sprinkles. That's why fresh is always best to give your customer a chance to enjoy them and stay preserved for the events. When you walk inside a bakery, cafe, or even Starbucks, cake pops are kept in a chill display case to stay fresh. Considering they're sold on a large scale and aren't made to order, you'll notice the chocolate cake pop from Starbucks appears as though it's sweating, which is the condensation occurring on the surface. Instead, my tips for storing are lying down on a paper towel inside of an airtight container to shield from moisture. Or the second way is arranged inside of packaging, like this cake pop box, all ready to go for pickup or delivery. The stand has to be stabilized by inserting floral foam into the bottom to prevent the pops from rocking around. Be aware that just because it looks good doesn't mean it is. When cutting into a pop, no mold may be visible, so double check to see if it has a minty smell. That's a sign the cake pop is spoiled and has to be thrown out. I suggest informing your customers about the perishability of these and to enforce that 2-day rule of rolling, dipping, and decorating. Ensure there's plenty of dough on hand to create a batch of cakesicles prepared with whichever method of your preference, dipping or molding. The magic number is still 2 days before, same time as the cake pops since it consists of the same dough kept at room temperature. I apologize if some of the instructions get a bit repetitive. Just want to make sure I cover everything you need to know. A summary of the to-do list 2 days before your deadline is thawing out the dough, then getting all the cake pops and cakesicles rolled, dipped, and decorated. A bonus add-on is Madeleines and wafer cookies. I mentioned earlier how they should be prepped at a later time than the other dry dip treats. Actually, it's because they tend to dry out and get stale quicker, or even split along the edges. So for best results, plan on dipping and decorating them time in that period of 2 days before, along with cake pops and cakesicles. Almost at the finish line are the most perishable treats of them all, which are candy apples and chocolate-covered strawberries. Although the shelf life of candy apples depends on many factors, here are some tips to extend that time as your insurance policy. The first factor is prepping your apples properly. A fast yet effective way is the same-day apple method, with a mixture of vinegar and baking soda added to a pot of boiling water. A huge advantage of same-day apples are that, just like the name, they can be dipped in the same day. Turn the apples around in there for 10 seconds to remove the wax for bubble-free apples. Consider the prep time will need 10 to 12 hours to allow the sap to come to the surface of the skin, and candy apples should be dipped no more than 1 day before the event. To decide where to fit the prep time into your schedule, let's say the apples are due on Wednesday. You would prep them the night before you're ready to dip and wait overnight 10 to 12 hours. Then on Tuesday, dip them into the candy mixture and they're all ready for the event on Wednesday. Or the alternative plan to get the apples dipped and done within the same day is to clean them Tuesday morning, say 8 a.m., then wait 10 to 12 hours to dip later that evening at 6 to 8 p.m. It's all about how it works best for you to space out your schedule. Immediately after boiling, shed off any remains of waxy residue by soaking inside of an ice water bath for 30 minutes. Give them a good dry and set aside onto the counter for 10 to 12 hours. Here's an idea of what they'll look like. The second factor related to shelf life is having the right candy recipe that holds up longer. The secret ingredient I stand by is powdered corn syrup, such as the high sweet, high humidity candy from Loran brands. To compare the difference, your candy apples may not even last for a day if your recipe doesn't contain the high sweet. On the other hand, high sweet can last up to a week depending on which colorings you use and how much. For reference, these gorgeous candy apples today contain 3 tablespoons of pink shimmer airbrush color. Pouring it in with the water, since airbrush colors are water-based. Right off the bat, airbrush colors break down quicker, and considering I needed 3 tablespoons to achieve the color, that puts its shelf life at approximately 2 to 3 days without breakdown. However, gel colors in combination with high sweet can last a week. If you've seen my Halloween candy apple video before, the metallic red apples only needed 1 tablespoon of airbrush color since the red was more intense, lasting around 5 days. Finish incorporating all the ingredients and wipe around the edge of the pot with a damp brush to prevent crystallizing. And the candy mixture is ready to boil once we clip our candy thermometer to the side of the pot. Begin cooking on medium heat until the candy mixture reaches 300 degrees without any stirring. Just cook low and slow to avoid scorching. Note that the mixture may be slightly longer than normal with the additional liquid from the airbrush coloring. The target is 300 degrees to remove from the heat. Give it a stir and wait a few minutes for the bubbles to settle down before dipping. The color is absolutely amazing without being too sheer, and thanks to the high sweet, there's a bit of wiggle room to stretch the shelf life to the max, especially for airbrush colors. Even though the powdered corn syrup prevents the candy from becoming sticky, while you're making them, the environment should be hospital room cold and free of humidity. 65 degrees is the ideal temperature. All that's missing is to give our pink shimmery apple some style with fondant polka dots scattered all around to resemble Minnie's classic dress, and super cute cupcake toppers. These are handmade and very high quality from the Madonella shop on Etsy. I will link her shop in the description box down below. They're so easy to attach onto the stick by placing a glue dot on the back of the topper. Following basic care instructions help to keep the candy intact. Always store your products in the fridge inside of candy apple boxes. High Sweet preserves other candied fruits such as grapes. The only difference is that the grapes go in the freezer and apples chill in the fridge. Although gel color can last a week, dip the apples anywhere from a day or less to give to your customers at their peak and free of breakdown, spotted as small pinholes on the surface. Last but not least, chocolate-covered strawberries are made pretty last minute and the closest in advance at either 12 hours before, the day of the order, or somewhere in between. Always start with room temperature berries and wash an hour or less before tipping to prevent them from getting mushy. Feel free to pour some white vinegar to soak into the water for an extra good clean, and to dry them off thoroughly, I give them a few spins in my salad spinner and gently pat off the excess with a paper towel. Chocolate-covered strawberries are the most delicate treat, being that they eventually leak and ooze liquid from puncturing the berry with the wooden skewer. As for the Minnie Mouse design, I remove the leaves. Surprisingly, it controls the leaking around the top by sealing up the berry in that area. Just like we did for the cake pops, I'm attaching a melting wafer to each side of the berry with a generous amount of chocolate and letting it set for 10 minutes while we dip the other berries. Standard designs are straightforward. My only tips are to hold the leaves back and dip as close as you can to the top, not only for a clean presentation, but also for leakage. I usually stand them upside down in floral foam instead of wiping off the backs and placing on a silicone mat. The reason why I didn't do that in this video is because a heavier berry design like the Minnie Mouse would be too heavy to put upside down, but it normally works great for any of your regular strawberries. Finish by completely coating the entire berry, tipping side to side to cover the melting wafers, and when dipping two-tone designs, heavier berries like this may be a little wobbly without the leaves. It's helpful to use a deeper cup or jelly container with plenty of chocolate for easy dipping. If you guys have ever gotten an edible fruit bouquet, they usually arrive with condensation from being delivered in a refrigerated van in order to keep their mass amount of orders fresh. So to protect your hand-dipped and decorated strawberries, just like many of the other treats, they should be stored at room temperature protected from heat and humidity, except berries should be eaten fresh the same day. It's a great idea to give your customers care cards with their orders to remind them of the instructions, and don't forget the edible glitter spray. You might want to pause for the final quiz question that Minnie wanted to review. The big question she's asking is which treats need refrigeration? A. Candy apples, B. Caramel apples, or C. All the above. I'll give you a few seconds. And the answer is C. All of the above, because apples are the only treats in this video that need to be kept refrigerated. Now we're done creating this order and can cross candy apples and berries off our checklist. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and you learned something new to confidently ensure your treats are on point for your upcoming event. Give this video a thumbs up if you did. It's Christina here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.